our publisher.
Rob, that was awesome. Thank you so much. I think maybe the Game of Thrones thing was too soon. All right, cool. So it is now time to shift into the Pathfinder section of the preview banquet. And this next F-load of slides is got a lot of secrets in it. And as a GM of some experience, I have one really good way of protecting my GM secrets. So I'm just going to take the second edition GM screen here and kind of just put that there so none of you guys prying eyes can reveal my secrets. What do you know? I critted. Okay. So as you can see, this thing is pretty sweet. This is the actual printed copy of our GM screen for second edition. It's got this sweet, sweet art on this side, and it's got a bunch of helpful charts on the back, of course. So I'm just going to keep reading those to myself during the presentation. Don't mind me. Lovely, lovely. Okay, here is a lineup of characters from some upcoming books in the Pathfinder line. Jason Bowman's going to be up here in not too terribly long to go through a really deep dive on the core rulebook and on the bestiary and on some of the other products. But I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about another group of products that are associated with Pathfinder Second Edition. And let's start with the one that we have already announced and talked about. And that is the Lost Omens World Guide. So this thing comes out with the launch products for second edition. This is a 136-page overview of the Inner Sea region in the Age of Lost Omens, which is to say in the modern era of our campaign setting. So many of you know that the last couple digits of the year in our fake world correspond to the last couple of digits in the world of our real world. And so this product will be coming out in 2019. That makes it set in 4719. And so what's been happening in 4719? The last time we did a hardcover version of our campaign setting, I believe the current year was about 2009, 2010. So it's been a long time since we've checked in with a lot of these places. And throughout first edition, the philosophy for our campaign setting as it regards to the adventure paths is we didn't really want to say, okay, that's already happened, because we wanted the chance for all the players to play all the adventure paths. And so we didn't want to say, oh, this fake NPC killed Karzug, for example. Let's say if there's an AP where you fight a guy called Karzug, and for instance, and spoilers. And so we wanted that to be your table in your group. And so we've been sort of reticent to say officially, like, okay, this adventure took place in this year, what have you. And so one of the opportunities that we have with the new edition is we're going to represent the campaign setting. And we didn't want to go through and be like, okay, remember all the witches now, because witches aren't in the core rulebook, they're all dead. You know, we didn't want to make some kind of bizarre, like, massive change to the campaign setting. So instead what we did is we decided to sort of canonize the changes that we've been doing all along through the adventure paths. So what you're going to see in 4719's Lost Omens World Guide is a world that is fundamentally shaped by the events in Pathfinder Adventures and Pathfinder Adventure Paths. I'll get a little deeper into that for a moment, but let's take a moment to take a gander at the beautiful work that our art team has put into the way this book looks. Something important about this book, and this will appear in the core rulebook in a very abbreviated form, because we've got a short chapter about the Lost Omens campaign world in that book. We have taken the 49, 50-some nations in our campaign world and broken them down into 10 geographically contiguous and thematically similar lands and realms. And so each one of those has 5 or 6 different countries in it. And it's just a different way to look at the world. But there is one sort of mega outlier on that, and that is the city of Absalom, the city at the center of the world. That is the main city of our campaign setting. That is the home base of the Pathfinder Society and the site of many, many, many Pathfinder Society scenarios and adventures that we've done. But we have not had a chance to really revisit it in a major way for quite some time. And so we knew that it needed to be its own region. It's the biggest city in the world, or the biggest city in this part of the world, and certainly the most influential. And so it gets its own chapter in this book. And one of the things that I'm super stoked about, other than the patience of the editors who waited on my manuscript for this chapter, is we're going deep on the island itself. So Absalom sits on the Isle of Cortos. This book will reveal that Cortos is the ancient Aslanti word for starstone, and so it's also sometimes known as a starstone isle. This is the island that the living god Eridan raised from the depths of the sea when he brought the starstone up and interacted with it to become a living god. And for a long, long time, if you're really familiar with the setting or played a bunch of these a bunch of the Pathfinder Society adventures, you know that this giant island that's like miles and miles and miles and miles across basically has like 2 towns on it, which is lame. So we put a whole bunch more detail into it, and there's a ton of different places to adventure. And this is just kind of a good glimpse at the opening spread for each one of these 10 regions. So each one of these gets a detailed map. Each one of them has this really cool thematic illustration across the top, you know, and information on what religions are worshipped there, on some of their trade goods, stuff like that, before we get into the campaign setting proper. I don't have any slides to show what an actual pages from the background and the historical section of these chapters look like, but I do have a pretty awesome final spread of this chapter, and it shows you what some of the rules elements in this book are going to be. So for each of these 10 regions, you're going to receive roughly a page of about 7 to 10 backgrounds that are catered specifically to the region in question. And so these go a little bit more deep into the opportunities provided by the cultures and the themes of these regions. The core rulebook ones are like, you know, butcher, baker, candlestick maker, and tavern guy. But these ones are much like deeper into it. So there's some fun stuff in there that's pulled from the world itself. I'll let you guys take camera photo pictures of this or look on it online and you can read all of it, and spoiler, spoiler, spoiler. But there's some fun stuff on here, if I do say so myself. And there are 9 other chapters in here that have other cool stuff. This one's got the Pathfinder agent archetype, as well as all of the backgrounds. Okay, this is what I'm talking about when I say that we've broken down the map into 10 different regions. So you see you've got a bunch of different ones. You can get a sense of like which nations go with which. Some of them make a ton of sense. Some of them are provided as sort of outliers so for example, there's the Shining Kingdoms, which is like Andoran and Taldor, and a lot of sort of like mainline, almost like you could sort of say good guy kingdoms or sort of straight fantasy kingdoms. But then you've got Galt in there, which is this ruined, failed state that's been under revolution for years and years and years. And so that's kind of like what happens to a fun fantasy kingdom when it completely goes to hell. As part of this mapping process and part of the fresh look that we're taking at the world, we've been able to do a really fun thing. The next thing I'm going to show you is not in the book, and you'll see why it's not in the book in just a second. We did show it off on one of the streams a few weeks ago, but I think it's so cool I just wanted to show you guys. Look at that. So that is the entire planet of Golarion. James Jacobs put this thing together. The first version of this, he actually like drew on a beach ball. We found this cool program to map it onto a rotating globe. So that is what it looks like, guys. And that thing right there, that little circle up there, that's about to go away, that's the inner sea. It's like as big as like, it's tiny compared to all this other stuff. So it's a huge world, and we're going to explore a lot of it in the coming years together. So let's talk about some stuff you don't already know. This is the next unannounced book. This is the Lost Omens character guide. This is going to be the second, how about that? This is going to be the second book in the Lost Omens World Guide series. These things are going to come out about quarterly. Most of them are going to be 128 pages, 136 pages in there. Every once in a while, we're going to do a real big, giant book. This is one of the kind of main ones. So this is a 136-page guide to really get the most out of rooting your character into the setting. The Lost Omens World Guide gives some backgrounds, gives some archetypes. The Lost Omens Character Guide gives you ways to dive deep into your character's ancestry. There are new heritages and ancestry feats for every single core rulebook ancestry. So you might be playing an elf out of the core rulebook, but maybe you want to play an Akuje elf from the Wagi Expanse, or maybe you want to play a Snowcaster elf from the Northlands. This is the book that's going to show you how to do that. It's going to give you some cultural stuff that's going to help you with your role-playing, but it's going to give you some mechanical hooks as well in the form of ancestry feats and heritages that will really allow you to continue to customize your game. Oh, and we're doing some new ancestries as well. We're going to introduce some ones that we've never done before, and there's actually an error on this slide. It says Bugbear, which would be hilarious, but it's actually Hobgoblin. So, sorry. So yeah, there's a Hobgoblin right there on the right. Then we've got leshies, which are these little plant guys on the left. And we also, let's go back, we also have lizard folk. So those of you guys who are listening to Jason's amazing Oblivion Oath stream that we do every Thursday on officialpaizo.twitch.tv, our official Paizo channel, know that our project manager Gabe has got an amazing lizard folk character, and he's using some of the rules that we're going to put in this book, so you'll be able to play him as well. So we're going to do some really cool things. Why hobgoblins? Well, they're fun. They're like tall goblins. But also, they played a major role in one of our adventure paths. And there is actually a hobgoblin, very small, but a hobgoblin nation in the middle of the Inner Sea now, thanks to the events of the adventure path. I don't want to spoil it. And so they're a bigger part of it. Leshies, we introduced a few years ago as monsters, and like half of our staff and many of our fans just were like, oh, we love those guys. So we thought that'd be hilarious to do as a race. And lizard folk are an ancestry we've wanted to do some more stuff with for a long, long time. Now, I can hear what you're thinking, you guys. You're like, that's cool, but what about tieflings? What about rat folk? What about like the ones we really super want? Yeah, we're going to do those eventually too. Soon. But I'm not announcing that book yet. But if you're like, I got a list of 12 monsters that I'd rather have ancestries for than leshies, yeah, we're going to do them too. Don't worry about it. Trust me. Okay, and then this book also has 5 complete factions with archetypes and other benefits of membership. So if you want to be a Pathfinder Society agent, you want to be a Hell Knight, you want to be a member of other organizations. We've picked 5 of the ones we like the best, 5 of the ones that are really thematically appropriate to the new normal in the campaign setting. We've put them in this book. Another cool thing that's in this book are templates that you can apply to monsters to make them appropriate creatures for, let's say, you want to have like a Nessian Hellhound, but you want to be like a particularly Hell Knighty version. Well, we're going to give you some cool little tricks you can play to apply templates to that stuff to make that work. Also, each of these factions are going to have a few NPCs in this book as well that you can use as allies, or if you're a GM, that you can use to populate the denizens of your Lost Omens campaign. Let's take another look at these weirdos. So this is a Leshy, that is a dwarf. The person in the middle is a Thessalonian from New Thassalon. New Thassalon, well, let's just say when the Rune Lords return and Return to the Rune Lords, they bring some landscape with them. And these are sort of time-displaced Thessalonians in the modern era. And so you'll have an opportunity to play those guys as well. Coming out in January of 2020 is the 3rd volume in these Lost Omens world guides, and that is Lost Omens, Gods and Magic. This is not the official cover. This is a mock-up, so it won't look exactly like this when it comes out, but the details are a bunch of stuff on the gods of the Age of Lost Omens. It's going to have an exhaustive index with hundreds of deities, with domains, favored weapons, and all the stuff you need to play those characters, updated to the 2nd edition rules. It's going to have new domains. It's going to have new feats that are specific to different faiths. It's going to have spells to customize your character based on their faith and so on. So this is not just a book for clerics and champions and druids. This is a book for everybody. So if you're a fighter and you worship, let's say, Caden Kalian, there should be some cool stuff in here for you as well. So that is Lost Omens, Gods and Magic. That comes out January 2020. Let's talk about the first adventure path for 2nd edition, and that is the Age of Ashes adventure path. That starts, it says July, it's really August 1st, and so it comes out the same time as everything else in our launch slate, so you can get your core rulebook, you can get your bestiary, and you can get your first volume of the Age of Ashes adventure path as well. So the Age of Ashes adventure path is a very cool fantasy campaign wherein you guys are growing up in a town that is not too far away from an abandoned Hell Knight fortress in Isger. And you go check that out, and you eventually find a series of portals and ancient gates that will take you to all corners of the Inner Sea and beyond. And as you travel to those places through this ancient gate, you start to unravel a mysterious conspiracy that involves the evil draconic god Dayhawk. It involves folks who are trying to enslave a whole bunch of the populace, and so a lot of this is like freeing slaves and fighting against tyranny. And there is a bad guy who is behind the whole thing, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, but holy moly, it's going to melt a lot of faces when it happens. So there is a known bad guy behind this whole thing, and maybe you'll get to kill him, maybe you'll get to convince him he's wrong, or maybe you're just going to get breathed on. Okay, That'll run through December. So we're going to double up the adventure path in July, August. So the last adventure path for first edition will come out pretty much the same time as the first adventure path for second edition. One of the reasons we're doing that is it helps us get all of the, you get 2 full adventure paths in 1 calendar year. So it's been just kind of weird that it's like, and then it ends in January. So we're going to shift that up, and we're also going to be starting Starfinder adventure paths in different months than Pathfinder adventure paths. So we have different options depending on what game you're playing throughout the year. Next thing I want to talk about is the second Pathfinder adventure path that we have not announced yet, and that is the Extinction Curse adventure path. Now, this thing is brand new, so we don't have a lot of art for it. So you're like, what is that tower? What's the deal with that? And what that is it ties into what I was talking about with the Isle of Cortos and the Starstone Isle. So this entire adventure path takes place on the Isle of Cortos as you, the members of a traveling circus, go from place to place and explore the island. And one of the things that's happening on the island right now is back when Eridan raised this, essentially the seabed to the surface when he raised the Starstone from the depths of the inner sea to become a living god, he realized that if he was going to attract a cult and eventually a city to his island, they were going to need to eat something more than the dried seaweed that came up with the ocean bottom. So he went and said, you know what I could really use is some method by which to artificially increase the fecundity of the landscape here. And so he looked around and he's like, well, okay, cool. There's this cavern in the depths of Orv in the Darklands, and they've got these magical gems, and they're a troglodyte society that seems to use those to grow food and stuff, and since they're monsters, I guess we'll just take them. And so he stole all those things and brought them up to the island. They call them Aeon Towers, and they're these giant crystals that are on top of these towers, and they helped it to make the farmlands and the forests grow healthy, and now the troglodytes are pissed off and they want him back. So they're going to try and steal that stuff back. They're going to try to sink the Isle of Cortos and destroy all life upon it. And the only ones standing between them are a bunch of clowns and jugglers and trapeze artists and fortune tellers. And it's going to be awesome. So this is going to be a nice tour of the Isle of Cortos. Yeah, give it up for jugglers. All right, so that is a quick glimpse at the GM screen. That's a quick glimpse at the Lost Omens World Guides going into January of 2020, and a quick glimpse at our next 2 Pathfinder adventure paths. Now, before we get into the meat of the core rulebook and the bestiary, I'd like to invite Tanya Woldridge to come up to talk a little bit about what's coming up with Pathfinder Society Organized Play.